Welcome everyone, and thanks for coming to this briefing on our new report called Why We Don't Need Deep Sea Mining, and how that report can help inform conversations around upcoming international negotiations at the ISA. Next slide. Today, I'm joined by Tony Dutzik, Nathan Proctor, and Maddie Warner. Tony Dutzik is an associate director and senior policy analyst with Frontier Group, a public policy research organization. Over the last 20 years, he has authored numerous reports on renewable energy and clean transportation, and his work has received coverage in major national and international news outlets. Nathan Proctor is a leading figure in the right to repair movement and helps lead its legislative efforts. He has testified in Congress and around the country on right to repair and has written 13 reports on repair markets, electronic waste, and related issues. Maddie Warner is a science communicator and leverages her policy expertise to safeguard and promote the responsible stewardship of our oceans and their ecosystems. She currently works as a program manager at the Ocean Foundation, where she raises awareness about the environmental, financial, and liability risks associated with deep sea mining for domestic and international audiences. Next slide. And my name is Kelsey Lamp. I'm the Protect Our Oceans campaign director with Environment America Research and Policy Center. We research problems facing our planet and educate the public and decision makers about solutions to create a greener, healthier future. I work with our staff across the country to build public awareness and support for efforts to protect marine habitats, save endangered marine species, and stop destructive and extractive ocean industries like offshore drilling and deep sea mining. We're excited to share some of the findings of our report ahead of the upcoming International Seabed Authority meetings. First, I will set the stage and talk about ocean ecosystems we'd be putting at risk if we began deep sea mining. Then Tony will discuss deep sea mining, critical minerals, and the energy transition. Nathan will cover the mineral impacts of electronics, and then we'll turn to Maddie to hear what we can expect from the ISA assembly meetings at the end of the month. Following our presentations, we'll open it up to questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll get to them at the end. So, next slide. I'll kick us off by talking about deep sea mining's impact on ocean ecosystems. When we talk about deep sea mining, we are talking about opening a remote, ancient ecosystem to disruption on a massive scale, ecosystems we are only beginning to understand. So what is deep sea mining? Across the global ocean, seabeds provide a critical habitat for a diverse array of life, including deep sea corals, sponges, fish, octopuses, and more. But the seabed is also home to deposits of minerals, like nickel and cobalt. While there are several types of mineral deposits in the deep sea, current efforts to mine the ocean, particularly in international waters under the jurisdiction of the ISA, have focused on the potential of mining ferromanganese or polymetallic nodules. These small, potato-sized rocks are formed gradually over millions of years and contain metals like cobalt, copper, nickel, and manganese, as well as rare earth elements. These nodules can be found in abyssal plains or underwater plains around the world, with the largest nodule field found in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone in the Central Pacific, which you can see there on the map. Next slide. As our technology has improved, we have been able to learn more about the ecosystems found across the deep sea, including the unique ecosystems that are associated with the nodules themselves. These areas are far from barren. One 2023 study identified more than 5,000 as yet unnamed marine species in the CCZ alone. Waters of the abyssal plain are some of the clearest seawater on Earth, and the wildlife we find in these parts of the deep ocean include deep sea fish, some of which can live for over a century, and deep sea sponges that can survive for millennia. These fields' smallest inhabitants are also critical, being the diverse microbial life that forms the basis of marine food webs and allows other species to thrive. These slow-growing and long-lived ecosystems are just now beginning to be studied, so we don't yet know all of the impacts mining would have on these ecosystems, but it's clear from what we do know that these impacts would be severe, long-lasting, and enormous in scale. Next slide. Economically viable deep sea mining would require remotely operated vehicles to tear up vast swaths of nodules across vast areas of the seafloor. Estimates vary, but one projection suggests that a single operation would mine an area of roughly 3,000 square miles over a 30-year mining license period, an area larger than the states of Delaware and Rhode Island combined. The slow-growing ecosystems of the deep sea are not likely to recover on any human timescale. One study involved simulated deep-sea mining operations found that even decades later, the areas of seabed disturbed during the experiment had failed to regain the density and diversity of ocean life they had before. Given the lifespans and reproduction rates of deep-sea life, it would take centuries to recover some of the coral and sponges. This disruption of the seafloor alone would likely have consequences for the rest of the ocean, as taking out one piece of an ecosystem, the life found on nodules, could have cascading effects throughout the ocean food chain. Next slide. But the impacts of mining could extend even beyond its enormous direct footprint. As mining equipment extracts nodules, it will also create plumes of sediment. One 2021 study found that plumes of the sediment, if discharged in the middle of the water column, could travel more than 600 miles in every direction from the mining site over the course of a single 20-year mining operation. This sediment could cause toxic substances associated with the mining operation, or could contain toxic substances associated with the mining operation. But even the sediment alone could significantly impact life in the ocean's twilight zone, where many organisms are filter feeders. Massively increasing the amount of sediment in ocean water could suffocate or starve filter feeders, used to a much less cloudy ocean. The deepest regions of our ocean are one of our world's last great wildernesses, full of alien and ancient life, and deep sea mining could see them destroyed or disrupted. Next slide. But the good news is we can still avoid this damage if we act now. Commercial exploitation of the deep sea has not yet begun at scale, and at this point, we still have time to stop the industry before it starts. Our report recommends that governments prevent seabed mining in their own waters, oppose seabed mining in international waters, and that companies pledge not to use minerals mined from the seafloor. Now I will turn it over to Tony to talk about critical minerals.
Great, thank you, Kelsey. Next slide. So thanks for the opportunity to present here today. My name is Tony Dutzik, and I'm the Associate Director and Senior Policy Analyst at Frontier Group. Next slide. We are a public policy research organization whose mission is to provide information and ideas to build a healthier, more sustainable America. And for the last 20 years, much of my work and that of my organization has been focused on moving America and the world toward a future of zero carbon transportation and clean renewable energy. Next slide. That future has now, that future has now arrived. Solar energy is the cheapest electricity in history. Electric vehicles are increasingly capable and affordable and are becoming a part of daily life in the US and around the world. Offshore wind energy is now here and poised to play a critical role in meeting energy demand in the decades to come. These and other clean energy technologies are well positioned to replace the fossil fuels that pollute our air, foul our land and water, and are warming the climate. But many of these technologies also depend on a set of so-called critical minerals. The need for minerals for the energy transition is one of the justifications that is being used for opening the floor of the Central Pacific Ocean and other areas of ocean floor to mineral extraction. Our report takes a critical look at that argument and finds, as others have, that deep sea mining is not necessary to supply minerals for the clean energy transition. Moreover, the current focus on mineral extraction is causing us to lose sight of more promising solutions that can work, starting right here today, to alleviate potential critical mineral shortages and build the new clean energy economy on a secure and sustainable foundation. Next slide. To understand why this is the case, we need to answer three questions. First, what are critical minerals? Second, what is the potential role of deep sea mining in the Central Pacific? And third, what are the alternatives? Next slide. From the perspective of the energy transition, critical minerals are those, as defined by federal law, with a high risk for supply chain disruption and that serve an essential function in one or more energy technologies. These essential functions range from things like permanent magnets for offshore wind turbines, to batteries for electric vehicles and energy storage, to wires for electricity transmission. There is no one universally accepted definition of critical minerals for the energy transition, but analysts tend to agree that the list includes graphite, lithium, copper, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth elements, of which specific metals such as neodymium and dysprosium are particularly important. Next slide. How many critical minerals will we need to make the clean energy transition? The short answer is more, but how much more is highly uncertain. Projections of future mineral demand are all over the map. In 2023, analysts from the International Energy Forum reviewed projections of future critical minerals needs from a variety of sources and found that those projections vary dramatically by a factor of 4 for materials such as copper and lithium to a factor of as much as 12 for cobalt. To put that in terms that we can all understand, it's the difference between making a shopping list to go to the grocery store and buying a dozen eggs or a dozen eggs. A vast difference. Why so much uncertainty? In large part, it's because while the global energy transition is moving quickly, it is also in its early days. Not only are clean energy technologies evolving rapidly, but the processes for producing them are evolving, as are the ways that those technologies are being used in society. Moreover, for materials such as nickel and copper, which are already widely used in the economy, clean energy demand is not the only thing that matters. Dynamics in other markets for those materials will have an impact on mineral availability as well. Next slide. So given the need and the uncertainty, what is the potential role of deep sea mining in the Central Pacific? The first step to answering that question is to identify which critical minerals are present there and which are not. The polymetallic nodules in the Central Pacific consist mainly of 4 metals: nickel, cobalt, copper, and manganese. You'll notice what's not on that list: graphite, as well as lithium and rare earth metals, which are present in polymetallic nodules, but only in trace amounts. It would only likely be produced as a byproduct of producing other metals. I do want to note here that the composition of deep sea mineral resources varies across different types of formations as well as around the world. And we're talking here mainly about resources in the Central Pacific. Copper is very important to the energy transition and is available in nodules, but production from the Central Pacific would be a drop in the bucket compared to global copper demand. According to a 2022 report produced for the International Seabed Authority, a mid-range forecast of deep-sea mining production from the Central Pacific would produce only about 1% of global energy transition-related copper demand in 2035, which is in and of itself only a percentage of total demand for copper. So while copper does exist in polymetallic nodules, mining the deep sea of the Central Pacific will not produce enough of it to move the needle in satisfying global demand, at least without much greater disruption to the seabed than is currently contemplated. So deep sea mining in the Central Pacific is not really a critical minerals issue. It is a tale of 2 metals, nickel and cobalt. Those are the 2 for which deep sea mining could potentially make a meaningful contribution on a timeline that matters. Next slide. However, there are also 2 metals that provide a fascinating example of how changes in clean energy technologies and how we use them can dramatically reduce critical minerals needs. The last several years have seen rapid innovation in electric vehicle batteries worldwide, first to reduce the use of cobalt, and then toward the use of lithium iron phosphate batteries that do not use nickel or cobalt at all. In 2023, 40% of all EV batteries sold worldwide were lithium iron phosphate batteries, up from just 28% 2 years earlier. And these shifts toward low cobalt and eventually zero cobalt and nickel batteries have already caused forecasts of the amount of cobalt we need for EV batteries in 2030 to be reduced by as much as 50%, compared with forecasts made just 5 years ago. And a 2020 study estimated that a future in which lithium iron phosphate batteries achieve roughly 60% market penetration by 2030 would reduce cumulative EV demand for nickel and cobalt by more than half. But that's just the beginning. Combining material substitution with improved efficiency and recycling can, according to the Energy Transitions Commission, fully close anticipated supply gaps for copper and nickel and significantly narrow them for cobalt, lithium, and the rare earth metal neodymium through 2030. That is a timeframe during which deep sea mining would struggle to make any meaningful contribution to metals demand. And over the long run, building an efficient, circular, sustainable materials economy can make an even bigger impact. The 2020 study that I mentioned earlier finds that combining a transition to lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, batteries with recycling could reduce cumulative EV demand for cobalt by 2/3 between now and 2050, and demand for nickel by nearly 70% through the year 2050. Next slide. These are not pie in the sky possibilities. These are things that are happening now. And the pace of innovation is, if anything, accelerating. Sodium ion batteries are nearing commercialization, which would further upend our expectations of future critical minerals demand, reducing our demand for lithium as well as other critical minerals. Meanwhile, large-scale EV battery recycling is beginning to ramp up, as with the launch of the Redwood Materials battery recycling plant in Nevada. That company intends to produce enough cathode and anode components for EV batteries for 1 million electric vehicles by 2025. Next slide. But even that's not the full story, because many critical minerals are also used elsewhere in the economy, including in consumer electronics, and our management of those materials has tremendous room for improvement. The great irony of the critical minerals debate is that many of the minerals that we consider so essential that we must destroy the seafloor in order to obtain them are also minerals that we regularly throw away in the trash. Indeed, the amount of copper and cobalt in the world's electronic waste is greater than the amount that is forecasted that we could extract from the Central Pacific annually through 2035 in a mid-range production scenario. Next slide. In our report, we propose a circular economy approach to critical minerals based on what we call the 5 Rs. The traditional 3 Rs of reduce, reuse, and recycle, plus reimagining products to last longer and use materials more efficiently, and repairing them when they break. Not only can this approach get the most out of the critical minerals that we extract from the earth, but it is a tremendous domestic resource of critical minerals, one that we control. Getting more out of the metals that are currently in use is not the only potential alternative to disruptive deep-sea mining. Research is also continuing on other potential sources of critical minerals from unconventional sources, including coal ash and other industrial and mining wastes. Next slide. So America and the world face a choice. Build a brand new extractive industry to mine one of the world's last great wildernesses, virtually guaranteeing the destruction of vast areas of seafloor for decades to come, or invest in the innovation, creativity, and systems that can help us to alleviate short-term critical mineral demand crunches while getting off the infinite extraction treadmill and building a sustainable clean energy economy for the future. One thing that our research, and as you can see from the slide, other research has shown, however, is that this is a choice. America and the world do not need to jeopardize the ocean in order to build the clean energy future we all desire. Next slide. And I will turn it back over to Kelsey. Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, we have Nathan to talk about the mineral impacts of electronics.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nathan Proctor. Thank you, Kelsey, for introducing me, but I want to talk a little bit about how right to repair, how kind of the consumer experience relates to some of these issues that Tony was just discussing. A little bit of a background on PIRG here on the next slide. So PIRG is a federation of state-based advocacy organizations. We have both a C3 U.S. PIRG Education Fund and C4 U.S. PIRG Arms, and our organizations have a 50-year history of winning real reforms that protect Americans' health, environment, and consumer rights. And I personally, along with Repair.org and iFixit, help lead right to repair efforts around the country. And we have backed 7 successful right to repair laws in 5 states in the last 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, however you want to put it. So when I first heard about deep sea mining, I had this kind of visceral reaction, given where I sit as a right to repair campaign person. Like, we are drowning in electronic junk, which relies on these critical minerals. They are treated as disposable by all parts of the process. Manufacturers have made many decisions in the process that increases the disposability and material inefficiency of these products. I listed a couple things that we experience here. I'll go back to these a little bit later, but now that products are connected to the internet, they require constant software support, and that software support can be turned off at any time. We used to buy products, they used to come with a host of standard replacement parts and readily available documentation. None of that's true anymore. There's minimal repair support. Batteries are glued in and other design choices are made. And so when I think about critical minerals, it's hard for me to square that to this experience. And it's also hard for me to think about these critical minerals just in the context of, oh, we're going to use them in clean energy technology, because I'm aware that we're using copper especially, but all of these materials in everything across the economy. These are very widely used materials, including in disposable products. And I think that we should think of the resources, these already mined and extracted and refined materials, as a key, material resource, a strategic reserve. If these are going to be, if these materials are going to become more scarce and difficult to have. So let me just run through a few things. So first, I want to talk a little bit about some of the devices that we kind of go through, and I'll start with cell phones. Americans replace some 416,000 cell phones every single day, part of a massive global churn of cell phones. As you can see here from the slide, 1.2 billion cell phones shipped in 2023. Almost everybody in the world who needs a phone already has one. These are almost all replacement phones. And so in terms of critical materials, this adds up pretty quickly. This is, our cell phones equal about 7,920 metric tons of copper and 360 metric tons of the rare earth metals like neo. I'm not going to say it right. I don't have it written out. I'll go back to it when I have it written out, because I don't want to say it wrong. That'd be embarrassing. Now let's go to another product, which I think is, to me, a poster child for disposability, and that's these wireless headphones like AirPods. This is a picture from the iFixit teardown. In order to get the battery out of these are the original ones. They're $179. You had to cut them open, break open the hard plastic shell to get the tiny little battery out. Now, that means that as soon as that battery wears out, that entire headphone is garbage. And I find it crazy that you can sell a $179 pair of headphones that are designed to die as soon as the battery wears out. And in fact, rare earths like neodymium and dysprosium are used in memory for memory and electronics, as well as magnets such as speakers and headphones. So the supply of those rare earths is very limited, and the deep sea isn't a very viable source, as Tony imagined, but 5% of all of those rare earth metals used globally in 2015, nearly 1,400 metric tons of neodymium and 165 metric tons of dysprosium were for acoustic transducers, aka speakers and headphones, earbuds, etc. And as you can see, like, I have this other slide, this other picture here, which is from a Vice article when the AirPods came out. Like, just the sheer disposability of these products is such a shock to how we used to think about. I mean, if you asked me as a kid, like $179 pair of headphones should last more than a couple years until the battery wears out. Another product that we want to highlight is vapes. And so we have a picture of a vape here that we took apart. This is a disposable vape there. This one's actually illegal to sell in the United States, but you can get it anywhere. It has a lithium ion battery cell. It has electronics. It has this foamy, nicotine substance. And if you want to go to the next slide, the Global E-Waste Monitor has actually highlighted some of these products. And even though these products are disposable, you can see I found one online for $20 this morning, which plays video games. So you can get a disposable vape product, which also lets you play video games. So they're, critical materials, right? So vapes produced globally accounted for 130 metric tons of lithium, along with 1,160 metric tons of copper. And there's also no standardized way to recycle vapes, part because they're half electronic waste and half toxic hazardous waste. And there's almost no way to get rid of them. Another product that we've talked about a lot in my work are laptops, especially Chromebooks. At the start of the pandemic, many schools bought these Chromebooks to facilitate remote learning. And this is a pile of software expired Chromebooks where Google's no longer shipping updates for to maintain the security of the software, and they can't be used anymore in a school setting because they won't access the state standardized testing websites and some of the other features that are required. So roughly 186 million notebook computers were produced in 2022. Each one typically uses about a gram of nickel, 20 milligrams of I don't know why I can't say this today, neodymium, and 270 grams of copper. Okay, so this is my perspective on fighting all these materials. This leads me to my key questions that I brought to this report. If we better manage the critical minerals in existing electronics, what impact would that have? What are the impacts of the various kinds of reforms, extending the lifespan, reducing disposable goods, improving recycling? And if we consider in-use materials as a domestic resource, how does that compare to other sources? And so I wanted to add this table here, which kind of answers that last question. You can see that the in-use materials represents a fairly significant amount of both the copper and the nickel that we have also in kind of mining resources. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the broader landscape of waste. We kind of went through these particular examples, but let's zoom out a bit. According to the UN's Global E-Waste Monitor, which is like the kind of most important way to track global e-waste, 62 million metric tons of e-waste were generated worldwide in 2022. That's 17 pounds per person globally, significantly more in the United States, where we produce 46 pounds per person, and 22% of the world's e-waste was properly recycled. And if we go to the next slide, I think there's some surprising findings within that document. Manufacturing new electronics is growing 5 times faster than the capacity for recycling e-waste, which means 22% of our e-waste is getting properly recycled. That number is going down all the time because we're putting way more new electronics into the system than we're adding recycling capacity. We aren't recovering rare earths from electronics. We just aren't doing it. 99% of the rare earths that we use to meet demand comes from extraction. Less than 1% is from recycled materials. Smaller devices like vape pens, phones, IoT devices are an increasing concern and have very low recycling rates. The most commonly recycled stuff tends to be bigger. It's easier to collect. People kind of know that they have to send it somewhere. And America produces the second most e-waste, more than 500 pounds of electronic waste every second. So our report found that extending the lifespan of these products we can get quick results. And in fact, that's according to a paper in the Journal of Industrial Ecology, that addressing these short-lived devices can help us achieve quick results on the issues of mineral supplies. So going over the kind of devices I went over earlier. So if we extend the life of cell phones from 3 to 4.5 years, that could reduce demand for copper by 2,640 metric tons per year and rare earths by 120 metric tons. Extending the life of consumer headphones 50%, for example, from 2 years to 3 years, could cut neodymium demand by as much as a third, or a maximum of 50 metric tons per year. Vapes produced contain roughly 130 million metric tons of lithium, along with 1,160 metric tons of copper. Almost all of that could be eliminated. Addressing repair and software support issues, we could get more from our laptops. We cite one study which shows that lifetime expansion of laptops could save 75 tons of nickel and 20,590 tons of copper, along with additional neodymium. Expanding lifespans is just an incredibly fast and efficient way to maximize the use of these critical minerals. So, and if you go to the next slide, I kind of total up all of these savings. So we're talking, if we just did those simple steps, get a little bit more life out of this product, that product. Again, this is just 4 products. We're talking 24,390 metric tons of copper, 170 of rare earths, 130 of lithium, 75 tons of nickel, right? This kind of brings us to why we care about the 5 R's. And we kind of, Tony talked about these, but I'm gonna talk a little bit more particularly about how we're actually trying to execute that in policy. So if you go to our vision, we think that products should be designed to last or not be made at all. This is on the next slide. Repair options should be robust and non-proprietary. We should maximize second life applications. And a common example would be you can take batteries used in electric cars and then use them as grid storage, which is something that we're increasingly doing around the country. And it's basically repurposing trashed battery cells or discarded battery cells and using them in a second way. And we should recycle if we can't fix it or keep using it. And that's what we're trying to execute. So in terms of specific policy recommendations from this report, we think we should ban products with non-replaceable batteries like disposable vapes. These products should be redesigned, made reusable, made to have replaceable batteries. We should pass right to repair legislation to protect people's ability to fix stuff for a much longer period of time. We should incentivize more sustainable designs by implementing transparency about how fixable a product is. Nobody goes to the Best Buy and thinks, I want to buy something totally unfixable today, but consumers have no way of knowing. In France, they're using repair scores to indicate to consumer at the point of sale how fixable things are. That's incentivizing more repairable designs. We should also invest in these second life applications like using leftover batteries for grid storage. And manufacturers should give software support or alternatives like opening the software for products that they don't feel like supporting anymore, so they don't just immediately become garbage. And then finally, we want to dramatically improve our recycling systems. If we shrink the amount of stuff that we're producing, then we can give our recycling programs a chance to be more efficient with the rest. And with that, I will pass it back to Kelsey.
Thanks, Nathan. To wrap us up, we're going to have Maddie Warner talk a little bit about what we can expect at the International Seabed Authority at the end of the month. So I'll pass it to Maddie.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Like Kelsey said, I'm Maddie Warner, and I'm a program manager with the Ocean Foundation. We are the only community foundation for the ocean with a mission to improve global ocean health, climate resilience, and the blue economy. So the International Seabed Authority began their July meetings just a few days ago and will continue to meet through August 2nd to discuss the rules and regulations around deep seabed mining in international waters. These July meetings are the only time when the Council of the Authority and the Assembly of the Authority meet back to back. As you may know, the Council is a small group of member states who will be discussing and drafting the text of the mining regulations, while the Assembly is the large group of all 168 member states party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Over these next 3 weeks, countries will be discussing the future of deep seabed mining with 3 key moments expected during the assembly, including a discussion on a general policy for the marine environment, for the protection of the marine environment, a discussion of an overdue organizational review, often called the Article 154 review for simplicity, and the results of the Secretary General election. Next slide. Thank you. Awesome. So first, on the general policy for the protection of the marine environment, it's good to have some context. So in June 2021, the Pacific Island nations of Palau, Fiji, Samoa, and the Federated States of Micronesia made the first call for a moratorium on deep seabed mining. Since then, 27 countries have called for a similar form of a pause on deep seabed mining, ranging from a complete ban to a precautionary pause unless and until there is science that indicates mining can be done without undue harm to the marine environment and protective regulations are in place. A group of countries championing this moratorium movement have proposed to discuss a policy to protect and preserve the marine environment during the assembly meeting. As the ISA is entering its 30th year of operation, this policy could set important conditions to operationalize the ISA's Law of the Sea mandate to protect and preserve the marine environment, especially as new scientific information is regularly discovered about the deep sea, its importance to the climate, and the potential risks posed by deep sea mining. In the last couple days of the council meetings, just earlier this week, various member states have vocalized their interest and intent in discussing this type of policy, noting the critical need to protect the ocean and its systems from harm. Next slide, please. So secondly, on the Article 154 review, like I said earlier, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea requires an internal systematic review of the operations of the International Seabed Authority every 5 years. The last review concluded in 2017, meaning that this next review is already 2 years overdue. This review is a key way to ensure that the ISA operates as a transparent, accountable, inclusive, and environmentally responsible decision-making regulatory body. This review is particularly timely in light of questions and criticisms around the governance of the ISA, as highlighted in recent press reports from the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Bloomberg, and others. Next slide, please. Thirdly, on the Secretary General elections, the Assembly will hold elections for this position. It's elected every 4 years, and this year's election is coming at a critical time in the deep sea mining conversations. The 2 candidates up for election are Leticia Carvalho, a Brazilian oceanographer and civil servant, and Michael Lodge, the current Secretary General, a lawyer from the United Kingdom running for his 3rd 4-year term. Many have stressed that the ISA needs a Secretary General able to prioritize the protection of the marine environment and uphold good governance practices, including transparency, accountability, and inclusivity. Next slide, please. So to wrap it up, and before we open for your questions, it's important to note that the United States is not a voting member of the International Seabed Authority, as the US Congress has not ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. However, as the US participates in ISA meetings as a non-voting participant, also known as an observer, and has taken a precautionary approach to deep sea mining in both national strategy documents and bilateral statements. Various US states and territories have also taken action to ban deep sea mining in their waters, including just as recently as last week when Hawaii's governor signed a bill banning deep sea mining in state waters. With this bill, Hawaii joins California, Oregon, and Washington State in this important measure. In 2021, in 2021, the U.S. territory of Guam also passed a resolution calling for a moratorium on mining, deep seabed mining. State delegates of the ISA have affirmed that the process to develop the rules and regulations for deep sea mining cannot prioritize speed over the quality of work. It's a gigantic group project with diverging views on essential topics. These essential topics have far-ranging implications, including opening the ocean to a destructive and extractive industry that the world doesn't need, as we heard earlier. And I think that wraps it up for me. Thank you, Kelsey.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. We are now opening up for questions, and we'll be able to answer any questions you have. You can either type them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we will take them as they come in. So I'll give everyone a second to get started. Yes, Catherine, I'm going to unmute you. You should be unmuted.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, this is Catherine with Business Insider. Thank you for this call. I'm kind of learning about the International Seabed Authority, and I guess I'm just curious, like beyond this, the whoever takes over the authority, like beyond that, at these meetings, will there be any movement on I guess if deep sea mining moves forward, or I guess I'm kind of like, what are the pivotal things to watch beyond just who takes over the authority?
Yeah, I'll pass that over to Maddie.
Yeah, I can take a first cut at it. Thank you for your question, Catherine. Great. And I would love to follow up afterwards with a little bit more detail too. I can send you some resources as well. I think that one of the pivotal things to keep an eye on is the conversation of the venture industry, the speculative venture industry is pushing right now. Specifically, the metals company is a company that is hoping to start deep seabed mining, and all of their press releases, a lot of their information has consistently said that they will submit a mining application after these July 2024 meetings. And they've been really, really vocal about wanting to submit an application, potentially without these regulations in place, which is concerning. Because it's important to have rules and regulations in place before opening an industry like this. So that's something that I would keep an eye on, is what will happen in the venture industry after these meetings.
Yeah, to put a finer point on it, this would be the first, to my knowledge, the first application for exploitation of the seafloor for commercial scale. So while that won't be decided at the meetings this August, if that application goes in, we could see that move forward over the course of the next few months. Do you have another question, Catherine? I see your hand is still raised. Awesome. Other questions? Feel free to post them in the chat or raise your hand. Maddie, Catherine also posted in the chat any ETA on when regulations for the deep sea mining would be finalized at the ISA.
That's a great question. And to give you an answer that is not really a good answer is that states are working diligently on these regulations, but they are prioritizing quality over speed. And so there's not really a final ETA year or number about when we can expect these regulations. There's a lot of science coming out in what can be some of the issues with deep seabed mining that states are really taking to heart. There was actually a recent study released, I want to say a couple of months ago, maybe in June, about the potential metals toxicity of the discharge plume that I think Tony spoke about how the potential metals that would not be removed from the seabed could actually affect mesopelagic species. And the unfortunate thing is we don't know how those species would react because we've never had studies on that before. So I think that's these states are really working to take this in a very serious manner to identify how they can best protect the marine environment in developing these regulations.
Awesome. Other questions? Hold on for a couple of minutes to give people an opportunity to write them. I guess while we're waiting, for Tony or Nathan, as you were writing the report, what was one of the biggest surprises you found after doing the research? Maybe Tony can kick us off.
Gosh, that is a good question. I think the thing that is most surprising to me that has really been borne out over the last few years of experience is just how quickly innovation is happening particularly in the electric vehicle battery space, which is a critical space for the exploitation of the minerals that we're talking about when we talk about deep sea mining. This is I'm old enough to remember when it was uncertain that we would be able to develop batteries that would be capable of operating a car over a long period of time. And not only have we achieved that threshold, but we've managed to simultaneously create electric vehicle batteries that are more effective, have longer range, are more efficient in their use of materials. There's been a dramatic improvement over the last decade in the efficiency, kind of the materials efficiency of EV batteries. And so, you're really seeing this kind of like, flowering of a variety of different ideas for how not only we can develop batteries that overcome the limitations that EV batteries currently have, but also how we can build batteries that use more abundant materials, less scarce materials, and do it in more efficient ways. So, to me, I think the thing that has been, the biggest, both in the writing of this report and also just kind of in general over the last couple of years, is the degree to which that technology advancement has happened. And I think that is a really promising thing, both because it reduces the degree to which we are locked into scarce materials that we need to exploit ever more sensitive areas of the world in order to produce, but also the degree to which it creates flexibility in our supply chains. We're not limited to just one set of materials, but actually are developing technologies that enable us to use a greater variety of materials over time. So to me, that was the thing that I think was if not surprising in writing of the report, has been one of the most surprising and exciting things that I've seen happening in the clean energy space in the last couple of years. And if you think back to 3 or 5 years ago, our expectations of what the technological world was going to look like have changed dramatically. And I suspect that in the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to change more. And I think our job is to make sure that whatever that we set guardrails around that technological development to protect our most critical ecosystems and places and people, and also develop the systems that enable us to do that in a way that is really sustainable for the long run.
Great. Nathan?
Yeah, I think to me, the thing that I was really underscored for me in this report was how important this moment is to fix some of the problems in the way that we've conceptualized electronics. And we've put some really bad practices into place in terms of locking everything down, making the use of them proprietary, thinking in extremely linear and kind of blinders on ways about electronics. And now we want to do a massive transition of this critical infrastructure to make it, to address climate change. And if we replicate all the worst decisions made about cell phones and other kinds of disposable gadgets into if we don't address those things and then we replicate them in our cars, which are totally dependent on the internet and proprietary software, and then the batteries glued into the frame, which is the thing that's happening now on EVs, like we are going to, it's like this is a moment where we should get the engineering and the design and the circularity kind of planned now, so that we don't realize 10 years into this process, like, oh, we've totally screwed the future by thinking really short term about how we build and deploy these resources. So it is time, now is the time to think about how to do it smart in a long-term way that really benefits humanity. And I'm glad every day that I get to stand up and fight for those things, but it's kind of dire out there. This is a really important moment for us. And that was really underscored when I was thinking about just how scary some of the negative environmental impacts of doing this the wrong way are.
Kelsey, can I add one more positive surprise?
Yeah, absolutely.
When we went into this project, we were, focused on a lot of different things, but really kind of focused on this issue of product lifetime extension. And it has been really edifying to me the degree to which people in the clean energy world are taking the importance of that quite seriously. So there have been studies that were done, I believe, by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, looking at what are the potential benefits of building solar panels that last 50 years instead of 25 years? How much materials can we save? How can we engineer not just for efficiency and cost, but also for durability? There have been a great number of NGO studies looking at ways that we can adjust our transportation systems so that we can get the most use out of our electric vehicle batteries. Throughout government in the NGO space, and I'm assuming also in industry, there's an increasing sense that this is a critical solution to the problem. And, to me, I think a lot of that is in very early days. We need the policy to catch up to the thinking, but to me, I was very positively surprised by the degree to which this is really a central issue that many people in the clean energy space are taking to heart and taking very seriously.
Yeah, and definitely one of the things I found most hopeful about the report was highlighting this path that would allow us to reconceive our material economy in a way that would also allow us to protect amazing places like the deep sea, but also in the long run, other parts of our planet that are at risk of mineral extraction. And really, as Tony said, getting off the endless extraction treadmill as we reconceive what it means to live sustainably on the planet. Okay, well, any final questions? Last call. Maddie, what are you most hoping to see coming out of these ISA meetings?
That's a great question. I am really excited to see this conversation on a general policy for the protection and preservation of the marine environment. A similar conversation was proposed last year and it just didn't happen. So I'm really, really excited. There's a much bigger group of countries who are pushing this forward as an effort to talk about what the ISA needs to do to think about the environment as a whole and how to protect and preserve it. So it's a very exciting moment, and my fingers are crossed that the conversation goes well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, on a couple hopeful notes, I think we will wrap up there. Thank you everyone for coming today and learning more about why we don't need deep sea mining and how conversations at the ISA over the next few weeks might play into whatever the future holds for our deep sea. So I hope that this was a helpful conversation to context the news that's about to come out, as well as a great foundation in learning more about how we can restructure our materials economy to not only have a more sustainable future, but also protect those places like the deep sea that are truly incredible wildernesses. So I'm really happy that you all joined us. We will be sharing the recording with the folks who registered afterwards, and then we will also post parts of this to our YouTube channel later. But thank you all for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.